A warm wind rolled over the plains, stirring dust devils along the faded trails and carrying the low whinny of a tired horse. Jack Mercer rode quiet in the saddle, body swaying with the rhythm of Samson's gait, hat low over his brow, shadows sunken in thought. He hadn't spoken more than 10 words since dawn, and liked it better that way. The world was too noisy with regrets that a man couldn't lasso or outride. He'd tried both. The horizon stretched wide open, the kind of endless that only the West could offer. Every few miles brought an old homestead or a half-tilted signpost, skeletons of better times. Jack took them in, his eyes scanning not with suspicion, but a quiet sorrow that came from knowing what couldn't be mended anymore. He approached Mourning Creek just as the sun tipped westward. From the ridge, the town looked like so many he'd passed, wood structures in various states of decay, a church steeple tilting left like a drunk saluting the past, a main street with more dust than life. The railroad had bypassed them once, and prosperity hadn't returned. Folks still lived here, sure, but you could tell by the slow way smoke curled from chimneys that ghosts outnumbered laughter these days. "Smells like apples and regret," Jack muttered to Samson, who snorted in agreement. He passed under the weathered arch that read, "Welcome to Mourning Creek," half the letters chipped away. Children stared. Mothers watched from behind window curtains. Jack wasn't a lawman anymore, but some part of his bearing, shoulders square, back straight, eyes wary, still announced, "This ain't a man to cross." At the livery, Moses looked up from brushing a mule. He squinted through the smoke of his corncob pipe. "Well, I'll be. The ghosts send you, or are you really here?" Jack swung down, boots hitting the dirt with a dull thud. "Only ghosts I mind are behind me," he said. "Need a stall for Samson. Might stay a day or two, trade some horses." Inside the general store, the smell of flour and kerosene wrapped around worn wood shelves. May Whitfield was restocking bolts of cloth when Jack stepped in. She looked up, surprised. Then she smiled, curious and cautious. "Don't get many strangers staying long," she said softly. Jack took off his hat and nodded. "Ain't many towns left to come back to. This one seems like it's still trying." Figured that's worth something. Dust rose gently behind Jack Mercer's horse as he approached the outskirts of Mourning Creek, the morning sun barely clearing the horizon. The town unfurled slowly in the distance, a cluster of crooked rooftops and swaying signs, hemmed in by endless prairie. Faded paint flaked from dry clapboard facades, and a church steeple leaned ever so slightly, like it had been trying to whisper secrets to the wind for years. Jack tugged the reins, easing Samson to a slow trot. A creaking weather vane spun on the livery roof as they passed. The town looked smaller than he remembered from years ag. Oh, he'd wandered through once in his badge-wearing days, too busy chasing down a fugitive to care much about its windows or dust or smiles. Now he noticed everything. A pair of boys chased each other near the saloon, laughing in the amber light. An old man, broom in hand, swept the porch of the town hall. A horse shifted in its post, stamping quietly as if even the animals had learned the rhythm of Mourning Creek. Hush, wait, endure. As Jack dismounted outside the general store, the door creaked open. May Whitfield stepped into the frame, apron dusted with flour, hair tied back with a pale blue ribbon. "Don't see many horse traders this early," she called, shielding her eyes. There was curiosity in her voice, not suspicion. "I was ahead of schedule," Jack said, dropping a quiet smile. "Figured I'd trade a few ponies, rest a spell." May nodded, drying her hands on a rag. "You'll find our beds clean, our eggs boiled, and our jokes older than the hills. We don't move fast, but we see straight." They exchanged no names just yet. Something about Mourning Creek insisted on earning introductions. Jack tied Samson at the post and stepped across the threshold. The bell jingled once, soft as a memory. Inside, the store smelled like tobacco, oats, and wood polish. Sunlight spilled through high windows onto barrels of beans and shelves of tin goods. Jack wandered aisles slowly, hands in his pockets. Every corner felt like it remembered better days. "There's peace here," May said softly as she slid a sack of flour onto the counter. Jack paused. "That's so?" She met his eyes. "For some of us, peace just means no one's come to take it away. Not yet." Outside, the wind rustled the chapel spire. Jack turned slightly and listened. Mourning Creek, for all its quiet, was holding its breath. Sun was already leaning westward when Jack Mercer tugged at Sampson's reins and stepped down outside Whitfield's general store. The bell above the door gave a tinny ring as he entered, hat in hand, dust from the trail still clinging to his boots. May Whitfield looked up from the ledger with eyes the color of worn denim, sharp, a little tired, but kind. He asked for oats and tack oil. She offered stew and a place to rest. Said the barn out back was plenty for a wanderer, and if he didn't mind dusting shelves between trades, they'd call it square. "You don't strike me as someone looking to keep still," she said, ladling stew by the fire. "I don't reckon I am," Jack replied, pulling off his gloves. "But the road ain't what it once was neither." That night, the store was quiet save for the tick of a wall clock and wind slip whispering through the eaves. Jack lay on the storeroom cot, the scent of lavender soap and horses drifting in from the barn. It had been years since he'd imagined staying anywhere. The next morning, he caught sight of movement near the feed bins, just a flash of fabric and bare feet. Outside, he found the culprit. A scrawny girl, maybe 12F, frantically stuffing oats into a burlap sack. He didn't draw his gun. "Easy now," Jack said gently. "Looks like someone's working up an appetite for herself or something else." The girl spun, eyes wide and fierce. "My horse is sick. Ain't eaten in 3 days. You gonna stop me?" Jack looked past her at a stick-limbed filly with a ragged mane tied behind the stable. Then he handed her a biscuit from the counter. "What's her name?" "Junebug," she replied, defiant tears brimming. "That's a good name." He crouched beside her. "I'm Jack." "What's yours?" "Charlotte," she sniffed. "But folks call me Charlie, 'cause I ain't like other girls." "That's so." Jack grinned. "I reckon that's a good thing." From then on, Charlie stuck close. She followed him through pastures, helped brush down the horses, and asked too many questions. Jack taught her how to loop a rope proper, and she taught him how to laugh without feeling guilty. May watched from the porch, arms crossed and a smile tugging at her cheeks. As the days lengthened, something unspoken settled among the three of them, like the echo of something lost being slowly found. Jack began to wonder if perhaps rest wasn't just something for the wounded, but maybe for the healed too. Morning sun cast long shadows across the cracked boardwalks of Mourning Creek as Jack Mercer guided Sampson through the sleepy main street. He tipped his hat to May, already sweeping dust from the general store porch, her eyes meeting his with a warm, practiced smile. The town moved slow, like an old song, familiar, fraying, but Jack didn't mind. He'd begun thinking, for the first time in years, that maybe he could grow roots here, at least for a season. Inside the telegraph office, the air felt tighter. Amos Grady, the tin-eared clerk, hung back behind the counter like something was itching under his skin. The second Jack stepped in, Amos straightened and awkwardly pushed his spectacles higher on his nose. "Telegram came just now. Mercer," Amos mumbled. "But it ain't for you." Jack raised a brow. "You always greet guests like they robbed you at cards?" Amos nodded toward a yellow slip resting on the desk. "It's from the Atchison line. Addressed to Mayor Howe, but marked public interest. I reckon the words are going to spread faster than butter on hot bread anyhow." Jack stepped closer as Amos recited, voice dry and cautious. "Notice, Mourning Creek selected as primary route for Atchison and Pacific Extension. Land requisition survey to begin within 30 days. Transfer of necessary holdings advised within 60. Compensation subject to negotiation." Jack blinked. "That official, stamp and all," Amos said, tapping the bottom. "Saw the boy ride in from the east with it myself." Outside, a carriage rumbled up fast, Devlin Howe in full ducktail coat and polished boots, riding like a man who knew the future already wore his name. A small crowd gathered as the mayor stepped down, unrolling the same yellow telegram with studied flourish. "Ladies and gentlemen," he boomed. "Fortune rides the rails, and it's found us. This town will prosper again. All it takes is cooperation." Polite applause trickled across the dusty street, but Jack stood still, watching more than listening. How smile shone too brightly. Something in the man's eyes danced like a man savoring victory before the game had even started that night. Fences burned outside the Harper farm. A shipment of hay never arrived, and by morning, Mose stood at the stable doors, jaw like stone, telling Jack that someone had cut Samson's corral rope clean through. Progress might have come to Mourning Creek, but it wasn't walking in honest. It came fast, cold, and with hands already clutching the town's throat. The prairies stretched wide and golden, but to Jack Mercer, it felt narrower. Every hour Mourning Creek's quiet had curdled into something uneasy, a silence not born of peace, but of fear. Jack sat outside the livery one morning, repairing a busted saddle strap. The sky streaked with early firelight. Samson nickered gently, restless without a ride, sensing his master's unease across the street. Mose shuffled out of the stable he'd called home for 40 years. His gait was slower now, favoring a bruised rib from a fall. Though Jack knew better, Mose didn't fall. He'd been warned. Same as the others. May arrived with coffee and worry in equal measure. 3 more families packed up last night, she said, setting the tin cup beside him. No notice. Just gone. Jack barely nodded. Eyes drifting across the town windows shuddered. Shops snarled with dust. Even Charlie, usually bursting with energy, had gone quiet, keeping mostly to the back alleys. Her last words echoed from 2 mornings past. "They burned our barn, Jack, and they laughed when they did it." Later that day, Jack ventured to the edge of town, seeking the old chapel Mose always mentioned. In passing, its sagging frame leaned against the years like an aging sentinel inside. Dust hung thick in the air, and jackrabbit tracks dotted the dirt floor. But it wasn't the chapel's decay that tugged at Jack. It was the way the floorboards near the altar sounded hollow underfoot when he crouched to knock again. A voice startled him. "You're not the first to look for what's buried." Tobias Finch leaned in the doorway, silhouette fractured by the light. "But maybe you'll be the last willing to dig." "You knew?" Jack asked, brow furrowing. "I fiddled for silver once," Tobias admitted. Didn't like the tune. Came here to forget. Before Jack could press him, gunfire cracked in the distance. Sharp, sudden. They ran back to find the stable ablaze. Moses lay bleeding on the porch steps. Jack knelt beside him, heart hammering. Mose gripped his wrist tight. "Buried under the altar," he whispered, blood pooling fast. "Needs someone with a badge or a backbone." Charlie appeared moments later, face streaked with soot. She looked to Jack. Not the hoe, RC trader, but the man she was beginning to believe in. He looked down at his vest pocket, where the old sheriff's star he'd thought long buried now felt heavier than ever. The sun set in streaks of crimson, casting the prairie in long shadows that wouldn't lift until someone stood tall enough to scatter them. Flames lit the dark frontier night like a beacon of sorrow. Jack smelled the smoke before he saw it, sweet hay and scorched earth curling through the air with an urgency that made his stomach knot. By the time he reached the ridge overlooking Moses' stable, the barn was fully ablaze, its orange reflection flickering across the town's dusty rooftops. He spotted a small figure silhouetted in front of the inferno. He dismounted in a rush, heart sprinting. Charlotte. She didn't turn, just knelt in the dirt, clutching a blackened saddlebag, shoulders trembling. Jack crouched beside her. "They did it," she whispered. "Said my horse's cough was a nuisance. Then they waited till I was sleeping in the hay and torched it." "Did you see who?" She nodded slowly. "That deputy with the red bandana. Him and 2 others. I tried to stop them, but they just laughed. Said Devlin don't like holdouts." Jack looked back toward the street. No townsfolk braved the road, only shadows watching from windows, afraid to move, afraid to be deemed next. "I'm sorry, Charlie." Jack's voice caught as he placed a hand on her shoulder, the fire hissing behind them like some ghastly whisper. Samson pawed anxiously at the edge of the light. "You ain't got a thing to be sorry for," Charlotte said, wiping her eyes with the heel of her hand. "They did this 'cause we wouldn't give up. Most told me you used to wear the badge. Jack stiffened. He hadn't heard that name on his conscience in a long time. The star was there in his saddlebag, buried like baggage too heavy to carry, but too sacred to toss away, like a wound that never stopped bleeding. I used to believe in justice, he said quietly, gazing into the flames. Thought I could protect folks. But some years back, I failed. The cost stuck. I figured maybe moving on was better than getting someone hurt again. Charlotte tilted her chin. If everybody runs from fighting what's wrong, who's left to fix it? The barn crackled behind them, its roof sagging like a dying breath. Jack stood slowly, reached to his saddlebag, pulled out the tarnished star, dull from disuse, but still holding weight. He turned it once in his hand, then pinned it to his vest. Charlotte's eyes widened. You gonna stop 'em? Jack nodded, looking down the muddy street toward town. Not sure what I can stop, but I know what I can start. The rain had stopped by the time Jack and May reached the chapel, but the wind kept low and restless like it knew things weren't settled. Moonlight cut through the broken steeple window, silvering the dust that hung thick in the air. The pews stood crooked, hollow from years of neglect, but Jack's eyes were on the floorboards. This is where Mose said, he muttered, crouching near the pulpit. Under the boards, near where the founding plaque once hung. May knelt beside him, lantern in hand. If he was right, this changes everything. Jack drew his knife and pried up the closest plank. Decades of dirt and time had warped the wood, but it gave way with a groan. Beneath, dry earth mixed with brittle newspapers and rodents' nests, until his blade caught something solid, a rusted tin box wrapped in oilskin. May's breath hitched. Jack sat back on his heels and slowly unwrapped it. Inside, folded tight and yellowed with years, were deeds. Dozens of them, stamped with Mourning Creek's original seal, not the signatures recently filed by Mayor Howe. Jack's hand trembled as he turned them over one by one, names he recognized, names the land still belonged to, and at the bottom, a map. May leaned in, squinting. That ridge, the bluff along the southern creek bend, there's no farms out that way. There's silver out that way, Jack said, voice low. That's Devlin's prize. Railroad's just the excuse. Heavy silence settled around them. All this time, folks had been pressured, bullied, left wondering if the future had made them obsolete. But it hadn't been progress knocking at their doors. It had been greed, masked in profit and soaked in power. Jack stood slowly, folding the documents back into the oilskin. We show this during the founder's dance. It'll be the only time the whole town's watching. May caught his arm. You sure, Jack? Once you go against him. I've run from worse, he said. Then paused, met her eyes. But I've never had more reason to stop running. She didn't smile, exactly. But she touched his hand. Then let's go get our town back. As they left the chapel, wind stirred again, lifting ash and petal, as if even the dust had begun to believe in something new. Behind them, the chapel door creaked shut, and Mourning Creek held its breath for the reckoning to come. The sun dipped low behind the bluffs, casting long, wavering shadows over Mourning Creek as Jack Mercer wrote slow circles outside the chapel. The badge, cold against his chest for the first time in a decade, caught the last of the daylight, reflecting gold like it wanted one more day's reckoning. Inside the church, May stacked carefully unwrapped ledger pages on the altar, smoothing their dust-kissed corners, as if laying out some sacred scripture. Charlotte, barefoot and bruised, clutched a piece of bread from the store and watched Jack with eyes that didn't belong to a child anymore. Jack inhaled sharply and dismounted. Samson pawed at the ground, uneasy. Jack ran a hand along his muzzle and looked back toward town. The founder's dance would begin soon. Lanterns flickered across the square. Laughter played like distant wind chimes, and yet beneath it all was the low hum of something about to break. I thought maybe I could just keep riding, Jack said mossel. Why to himself? Trade a few more horses. Find a quiet creek. Forget what I let happen. May stepped from the chapel doorway, dirt streaking her apron, and met him halfway. You tried that already, she said gently. He looked at her, really looked at her, as if recognizing her not just for who she was, but for what she'd become. A haven. A signpost. I don't know if I've got enough left in me, he said. Then it's not about what you've got, she replied, resting a hand on his arm. It's about what you're willing to give. Jack closed his fingers around the telegram that Mose had handed him before collapsing. A nearly forgotten emblem of a greater wrong. Names erased, deeds bought with threats, a town bent under the grin of a man who never belonged. Jack secured his saddlebag, holstering both pistol and purpose. As he mounted up again, Charlotte stepped forward, face streaked with dust, but voice steady. You're going to fight for us? I'm going to stand, Jack said. And sometimes that's the same thing. May handed him a folded map, the proof they needed. She held on to his gaze a moment longer than necessary, then nodded. As Samson turned toward the lantern-lit square, Jack glanced back once. The wind caught the chapel's broken bell, letting it ring faint and clear across the dying light. A town waiting. A man choosing to remember who he was. And this time, he wouldn't flinch. Music had just shifted to a lively reel when Jack Mercer stepped onto the lantern-lit grounds of the Founder's Dance, his boot heels clicking against the old wood of the stage. Laughter faded into murmurs as the fiddler faltered and fell quiet. Jack's silhouette was calm and worn, dust rising from the hem of his coat, his old sheriff's star glinting faintly in the firelight. I ain't much for speeches, Jack said, voice low but firm. But this town's history's been trampled enough. Tonight, it stands up. He pulled the folded, dirt-stained deeds from inside his duster and laid them on the stage. Whispered recognition passed among the crowd. May appeared beside him with the old town map, ink faded but legible. Together, they laid bare the truth. Devlin's plan, the silver bluff, and the forged documents. The railroad was just a story. The real prize was buried beneath Mourning Creek. Devlin, seated near the front, stood slowly. That's enough, he barked, forcing confidence into his voice. Those papers are fiction. This man, he's a disgraced relic. No, sir, said a voice from the side Mose, pale and frail, propped on a cane but standing. He's the truth you were hoping folks had forgotten. Devlin's lip curled. He raised his hand, and in an instant, gunmen emerged from the shadows. The bells tolled over the churchyard as Mourning Creek erupted in chaos. Gunfire cracked through the night. Jack dug behind the stage railing, returning fire with the precision of an ex-lawman who'd once drawn lines no man dared cross. May, fearless, pulled townsfolk behind, wagons, shells whistling past her shoulder. Charlotte dashed through the scattering crowd, messages and bullets flying by in equal measure. Mose climbed the stable roof with a rifle and a prayer. He took one shot, striking true before ducking back under fire. The town fought alongside their fear. That's when Jack knew he wasn't alone. Devlin, seeing his scheme unraveling, made for the store. May reached the door first, blocking his path. He raised his pistol. Jack's voice rang out. You want profit, Devlin? Take it and lead. He lunged forward, catching the bullet meant for her. It tore through his side. He dropped, then rolled, reaching for his gun. Charlie threw it to him, her fingers trembling, but steady enough. Devlin fired again. Jack beat him by the width of a breath. The shot echoed. Devlin staggered, then fell, smoke curling from Jack's revolver. Silence reigned, broken only by the wind, and the heavy sound of the town beginning to breathe again. Dust hadn't yet settled from the Founder's Dance standoff, but Mourning Creek already felt different. Not louder, not richer, just steadier, like a storm had passed and left clearer skies in its wake. Jack sat on the porch of May's General Store, a half-empty coffee cup warming his hands, the chair beneath him rocking in rhythm with the wind. The badge was gone from his chest again, resting quietly in a drawer inside, but something deeper had been placed in its stead, not duty, not vengeance. Belonging. The chapel repairs were underway. Townsfolk who once shuffled past each other in silence now teamed up beam by beam, laughter echoing off clapboard walls. The old bell, silent for years, rang once more that morning, not in alarm, but as a promise, a reminder. Charlotte dashed up the dusty street, cheeks flushed, pigtails flying behind her, gripping the reins of a stubborn mule she'd borrowed for supply runs. Jack watched her with a half-smile. That girl, full of fire, had carried more than messages through the chaos. She'd carried courage. "You still sure you're not the law anymore?" May asked from behind the screen door, a coy sparkle brightening the weariness in her eyes. Jack chuckled softly. "I've learned the law's only worth the people behind it, and this town deserves someone better than me. Someone who didn't need a fight to remember who they are." May stepped close, handing him a slice of apple pie on a tin plate. "Maybe, but they trust you, Jack, because when it mattered, you didn't leave." He took a bite, nodded. She was right. He'd spent so long believing his penance was solitude, but Mourning Creek had shown him redemption didn't always come through silence. Sometimes it came through standing still, through letting others in. From the porch, Jack could see Samson grazing near the paddock, ears flicking lazily beneath the morning sun. Beyond him, folks moved like breath restored, fences repaired, livestock returned, hearts mended one act at a time. Charlie tugged and his sleeve. "If you're not going to be sheriff, can I be deputy?" He grinned, handing her a polished apple from the crate at his feet. "Deputy? You already outran my horse last week. Keep this up, and we'll have to build you a jail to run." Laughter rose. Gentle, real. Sorrow had led Jack to Mourning Creek. But sitting there on the porch, sunlight flickering between the slats, the laughter of a child, the warmth of a pie, and the quiet strength of a woman beside him, Jack knew. He'd traded sorrow for something better. He'd found hope,